5. Never stop believing. Ohin Ofori only saw him because he was a visitor and the people of Kibaitia were known for their hospitality, but he gave Kokori instructions that he was not to be disturbed under any circumstances after the American had left. Wayne stood before him, amazed at the regal splendor he saw in the courts before him. There were spaces where he would have placed gigantic potted palms. The bare floors needed rugs and woven mats to give them their due credit. The hand-carved tiles of fine smooth granite were beautiful. He refused the calabash of water until Kwesi elbowed him in the ribs. "What?" he hissed between clenched teeth. "You have to accept." "But I'm not thirsty." "It's a sign of welcome." "Oh. Thank you, Ohin. That will be very refreshing." Ohin Ofori smiled. "Now tell me. Why are you here in Tasmil? You are supposed to be resting. Why are you here? And what is the boy doing?" Wayne took a deep breath. He placed his hand into his pocket and took out the gold weight. "It is about this," he began. "It belonged to my great-great-granduncle. He came from a village in West Africa, 3 days' walk from the great kingdom of Ashanti. The name of the village was Kibaitia. Through it ran a river, the river of Wayemi perhaps, but you are an American. We call ourselves African Americans." "Oh. This cannot be accurate, Wayne my son," Ofori laughed. "The slave trade which you refer to it happened so long ago." "It came to an end only about 200 years ago," corrected Wayne. "I know very little about it," began Ofori. "Why?" Wayne sounded surprised. "You should know a lot about it. Why do these people of Kibaitia not know about it? It is clear that they do not. They laugh in my face when I tell them I am their brother." Ofori examined the gold weight. "This is intriguing," he said as he held it up to the sun and then turned it over. "It is not a gold weight from our village," he declared confidently. "It has a fault on it." "Even so, it is not one of ours." "Where does it come from?" asked Wayne. "I do not know." "What does it mean?" "Gold weights do not necessarily have a meaning, my son." "So where does it come from?" "Possibly from Ashanti. Perhaps you should take it to the Asantehin. Kibaitia is where my great-great-grandmother lived, and where my great-great-granduncle was king." Ofori looked at Wayne. "What do you want me to do for you, my son?" "I want to find the grave of my great-great-granduncle. I want to lay this down as a symbol of my return to my motherland." Ofori laughed. "You know the place of burial of the ancient kings is sacred. It is not disclosed to anyone save the elders. Why can't you disclose it to me?" "All the gold they possessed was buried with them." "No, no, American. You must not disturb the dead. You must forget this ridiculous idea of yours. Wayne swallowed. "Ridiculous. You call the dream of over 200 years a ridiculous idea. My great-great-grandmother was the sister of a chief. She worked on a cotton field in Mississippi until she died. She worked hard, and she lived a hard life, Ohin, but she could laugh, and she could sing. Do you know why?" Wayne's voice rose. "I think you should go and cool off, American," Ohin Ofori muttered. "Because she had a dream that, one day, we would come back. She did not know which generation, when or how, but she believed. And it is because she never gave up her hope, not even when she went to bed hungry, beaten, cold and sad, that I am here today. How can you sit there and call my great-great-grandmother's dream a ridiculous idea?" Ofori's eyes narrowed. "Son, you have been away from the motherland for too long," he said mockingly. "You have perhaps forgotten the laws of respect for the man in the high place." "No." Wayne was furious. "I have not forgotten those laws. I have learnt new ones on the cold, ruthless streets of the Bronx and in the humid South. The man in a high place who spits down on me will get no respect from me. I have learned the meaning of respect. And it does not mean fear." Papa Sabo was on the farm at the back of his hut. He had risen with the dawn and gone down to the farm. He had taken neither hoe nor cutlass. Tai had stormed off 3 nights before. Papa Sabo had not seen him since then. He heard that he was busy trying to organize the auditions. The young people in the village were certainly very enthusiastic. He could hear them practicing on all sides. Papa Sabor was angry and hurt. He had tried to get the girl he thought was right for his son, only to be let down. Father, Tai had asked, if you are so besotted with the girl, why don't you marry her yourself? Papa Sabor had struck him violently. Tai had fallen. He had looked just as he had when he was a boy, afraid and timid, but only for a second, for he remembered that he was a man. He had got to his feet and looked his father in the eye. The answer is no, he had said firmly. Papa Sabor's wife had stood by the door trembling. Papa Sabor was angry that he had not got his way, and more angry that his son had dishonored him in front of guests. She went into the house and reappeared with a bowl of rice and spicy okra stew. You cannot stay out here, she said. You must come to terms with it. He is a man. He must make his own decisions now. You should not have hit him. What do you know? I know that you have not been yourself for some Papa Sabor. All these funny moods and bouts of violence, what is the matter? Nothing, woman. It all began when Yancy, your friend, died. Papa Sabor looked up at her. You think I should forget about the money he owed, don't you? I think friendship is worth much more than 20,000 cedis. After all, the land belongs to no man. It is the ancestors' land and legally belongs to the chief. So, you want me to go to her after all this and tell her that she no longer has to pay me? Is that what you are saying? That is what Yancy would have done for you. You know it. A debt is a debt. A friend forgets a friend's debts, Papa Sabor. See how wealthy Tai is. If I had taught him policies like that, he would never have got where he is today. His wife nodded sarcastically. Perhaps you are right. Papa Sabor frowned deeply, huddled himself into a shady corner and began to eat. Tasmil glared at Wayne and then threw her arms up in the air. Kwesi had gone home as darkness was falling. Look, why don't you just write down what you want to tell me? We can't drag poor Kwesi with us all the time. She looked furious and wrote in the soil, what makes you think I am going to go around with you? I have explained, Tasmil. Surely you understand that I need your help to find those sacred grounds where my great-great-granduncle was laid to rest. She wrote, do you think you are the only one with a dream? His eyes were solemn. He shook his head. I know I am not. Why should your dream come true? Why must you be the one to make it come true? Why not leave it to the next generation? Because it was given to me. It was part of my mission. How do you know? When you have a dream, you know. His eyes burned. Tasmil hesitated. You should not have spoken to the chief like that. I know. I cannot help you. I do not know anything about the ancient resting places of the chiefs. There must be someone who does. There has to be. I don't know. Think, please, Wayne said. He frowned and then he clasped his hands. Tasmil stared at him suspiciously. He was a friend of Tai's. She did not want to think of Tai. His words had wounded her deeply. No friend of Tai's was trustworthy. What was he up to? Listen. Wayne seemed to choose his words carefully. I don't want to. He paused and looked at her. She was staring at her feet. She looked very sad. Impulsively, he reached out and touched her arm, but she pushed him off and shook her small fist at him. If she had not looked so unhappy, it would have been comical. Okay. He held up his palms. Okay, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that, if you do me this favor, I will do you a favor, too. I heard Papa Sabor mention that you and your mother owed him some money, 20,000 cedis. He could feel her anger. She grabbed another twig and began to write again. It is not your concern. I want your help, Tasmil, but I do also want to help you. I will pay for your land, if you would just help me to find. Tasmil was already scribbling furiously in the soil. Do you think that money can buy everything? No, I didn't mean, began Wayne. Tasmil kicked dust over the words. With a swish of her head, she turned and stalked off. Tasmil. Tasmil. But Tasmil did not look back. Ohinofori paced in the moonlight. His elders stood before him. Are you certain it was a genuine gold weight? Asked Bokod, Ofori's closest elder. It was genuine. I put him off to protect our ancestors. You have nothing to worry about, my brother. Those who keep accurate records of our history are old men in remote villages who see and hear nothing of the outside world. They are very few, Ohin. Akuro spoke. You must never forget that the Odukobiye have the Ntoro of royalty, even if they lack the abuser. Our laws are not forgotten, Ohin, rest assured. These so-called African Americans, they all come with fantastic stories. Does he even look like us? Ofori asked. He does not look like us, Akuro offered. Well, perhaps a little, began Bokod, hesitantly. Ofori looked at both of them suspiciously, then he threw his nanas up in the air. Okay, so he looks like us, but does he sneak like us? Does he understand our ways? Bokod looked very wise and grave when he replied in a solemn tone, does an eagle caged all its life immediately learn how to fly? Ohin Oyori had no answer to that. The first cock crowed. Ophibia tossed and turned. She kept hearing voices at the front door. It had been raining all night, softly and gently. She sat up in bed. The sky was still dark. The air that rushed through the shutters of the huts was still clear and cool. She had been dreaming of the good old days, of smelling corn and nuts roasting on an open fire and hearing Yentai's hearty laughter as he teased Aunt Tasmil. Her eyes filled momentarily as her heart filled with nostalgia. She blinked the tears away. With an effort she reached for her overcloth and got out of bed. Outside the hut she lit the coal pot and let the coals blow orange and crimson before putting a pot of water on to boil. She closed the back door and opened the front shutters. Daylight had not yet arrived. She was about to open the bamboo front door to water the hanging potted plants, when a white envelope caught her eye. She bent slowly and picked it up. It was addressed to Mrs. Yancey and Tasmil. It was seldom that she received letters. Her fingers pulled at the sellotape that sealed it. A small cry escaped her. How can this be? Her eyes widened, and she stared at the contents of the envelope again, reading the short note again, then fell to her knees and wept loudly. Then she pulled herself to her feet. Tasmil. Tasmil. She burst into her daughter's room, the envelope in her hand. Tasmil sat up in bed. Her long braids stuck out in disarray around her face. She raised her hand in a questioning manner. When she saw the state of her mother, she jumped out of bed. The older woman sat trembling, a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. Tasmil tried to speak again. A sound that was not her own emerged. In frustration she fell at her mother's feet, signing at her to tell her the cause of her distress. A letter from Papa Sabo. He gives us 2 weeks to find another piece of land or pay him what we owe him. Tasmil shook her head. He could not do that. The land belonged to no man. Surely Ofori had the power to sort this out. Surely the land was technically only leased to the villagers, never really bought or sold. It all really belonged to Ofori. He had the power to decide what land went to whom. What shall we do, Tasmil? Your father, if he could see us now, would turn in his grave and cry out for justice again and again. Tasmil took her thick black pencil and wrote on the back of Papa Sabo's short cruel note, "We will buy back our land, mother." Do not shake, so do not worry. Ophibia threw up her hands in exasperation. But how? How? Papa Sabo has no right to threaten us. All it is threats. He can do nothing to us, mother. You know this, don't you? Ophibia's eyes opened. Have you forgotten whose nephew Papa Sabo is? Tasmil sighed. She knew this was more troubling to her mother than the threats Papa Sabo was making about losing the house. Papa Sabo's uncle had once been the greatest witch doctor in the whole of Kibaitia. He had been an evil man who never healed, never built up. People only consulted him when they wanted an act of destruction done. Most of the people in Kibaitia feared him, which was why he got away with so much. People said he had used his evil arts to raise his son up to the levels of the rich and prosperous. Do you know what I think, Tasmil? I think if we cross him, great evil will fall upon us. Tasmil shook her head. She wrote again, he cannot harm us. We do not partake in his rituals of blood sacrifices. Ophibia still trembled. Just think of it. He wanted you to please his son, you and his son disobeyed him, and he took your voice from you. He took your voice, Tasmil. He took your dream. Tasmil shook her head. She wanted to tell Ophelia of the old woman who had spoken to her at the WME. She wanted to tell her of the shooting star she had seen and the way she had slipped into the river. She scribbled down the untidy words that told the tale of what had happened down at the river that night. If you don't believe me, ask her, she wrote. Ophelia looked at her and became silent. She stood up and laid an arm on her daughter. My child, did you not hear the drums? The midwife has gone to the land of our ancestors. To the place of rest. Tasmil's eyes widened in disbelief. She is dead, Tasmil. We cannot ask her. No one saw a shooting star, my child, not on the evening you almost drowned, nor on the night you were born. It was she alone. Tasmil hung her head. She looked up at her mother again. With a deep breath, she walked to the small tidy living area where, above the bamboo shelves, hung a picture of her father smiling, holding her in his arms, Ophelia by his side. She went out to where the water pot stood. She emptied some of the cold abscented water into a bucket and walked to the bamboo screen enclosure that constituted the shower house. She scrubbed her body from head to toe, letting the cold water flow over her shivering body, leaving her clean and invigorated. Ophelia watched Tasmil's head above the bamboo screen. Her daughter's face was set like granite. And in her eyes was a look of determination that she had never seen before. Kokori was a good, humble man who did as he was told and seldom questioned authority. But he knew the difference between wrong and right. He was very troubled as he walked through the village center that chilly morning. The trouble was that Brima was his friend, his good friend. The most complicating thing was that Labina was his friend too. What was he to do? Was he to keep silent, ignore it? After all, they would say it was none of his business. He sat under the lemon tree for a while trying to work out what he should do. He felt very sad. He had seen many lives wrecked by people whom he called the destroyers. They were the people who only cared about getting what they wanted. They did not seem to bother in the least about those they hurt, betrayed or destroyed in the process. He did not like to be judgmental. It was against his nature, but he could not erase the memory of what he had seen last night in the silver moonlight on the illit lower banks of the WME as he had gone down to gather smooth pebbles to place on his aunt's grave, as she had requested. Earlier he had seen Brima. He had been watching the royal dancers perform in the village center. Labina had been busy cooking, he had claimed. She had felt too tired to join in with the evening's activities. Labina had certainly recovered, for he had seen with his own eyes her slender body entangled with that of Tai. He had heard her laughter ring out and he had heard her say, I've wanted to get rid of Brima for ages. He is so boring. He covers me with gifts I don't want. He won't let me out of his sight, and he's just so unexciting, not like you, Tai. He does not deserve you then, does he? He seems like an insanely jealous fool. If he sees me with anyone else, he argues. He is old-fashioned. He has this strange idea that for one man, there is only one woman. Like I said, he is an idiot. Tai had concluded. The day I saw you, I knew it was you. I do not care for Brima. He had laughed and gathered her into his arms. Their murmuring and giggling had melted into the darkness as a cloud covered the moon. Kokori had turned away. To be fair, he had dragged himself away, sick to the stomach. His heart was scorching as though it had been his own wife lying in another man's arms. Could this be the same girl who often seemed so charming, whose beauty appealed to so many of Kebaitia's young men? How could she have lied like that? Brima was the best, the kindest, the most gentle man Kebaitia could boast of. He worshipped the ground she walked on. If he sometimes seemed a little insecure, it was because she was known to flirt outrageously with whoever was available. Brima was not a fool, nor was he old-fashioned or an idiot. He was a good and sincere man. He loved a girl who was not worthy of him. Kokori had heard of this. He called it the disease of unhappiness that thrived in the cities, the epidemic of broken souls and broken marriages. It was selfishness, self-centeredness, deceit built on lies and false testimonies. He spat on the ground as if to get the bitter taste out of his mouth. Tai had brought this epidemic to Kebatia, an epidemic that could only lead to tears. Tasmil stood on the steps of the balcony. She was going to accept Wayne's offer. There was no other way. She had been knocking on his door for some time. There was no answer. The sun had not even risen yet. Where could he have gone? She decided to leave. Perhaps he had left. With a sigh, she began to stride off against the wind when something blew against her. She picked up a beautiful scarf and stroked the smooth silkiness of the material. She was certain she had seen it before. Oma. No. The village sellers. She folded it carefully. It would come to her again. She was about to continue when a sharp click made her turn sharply. Her heart hoped it would be Wayne, but it was not. Her face creased with lines of perplexion. What was Labina doing leaving Tai's room at this time of the morning? Why had he not heard her knocking? The truth dawned on her. Slowly her face grew rigid, as grim as an expressionless statue. She pulled out the silky scarf. With a sad look in her eyes, she turned away and ran back to the village center. There were only a few people around. The sellers were setting up their stores and the children were trying to help. Tasmil. She spun around. Her eyes met the warm gaze of Hekolil, the village historian. He had been her mentor for many years, long before she had gone to university. She recalled when he had sat her on his knee and told her the history of the Ashanti Wars and why Kumasi was the capital instead of Kumo. He had heard of her accident, and he was sorry. Tasmil was a bright young woman, and she used her tongue to build, never to destroy. Perhaps we should go into partnership, Tasmil, he said. You write good English. I know quite a bit of our local history. Who will record it accurately when I'm gone? No one will remember like I do. Tasmil smiled, but her mind was not with him. She had a feeling that Wayne had gone. I mean, imagine. This morning I was woken up before the first cock crowed by that crazy American. Tasmil looked at him. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. She tried to sign to him, where had Wayne gone, but he only looked slightly amazed and then looked away as though he thought she might be slightly brain damaged as well. Strange though it may seem, he wanted to know where the ancient kings of Kebatia were buried. Tasmil waited patiently. I told him, halfway between here and the next village. The silly man, I believe, has gone off to find it, he laughed. He wanted me to be his guide, to take him there. Not I. I would not venture into those bushes for anything. It's a long walk, wild animals, snakes you know. I tried to tell him that it was useless searching without a plan, but his heart is set on it. He said something about going alone if you needed to walk a path that no one would walk with you. Tasmil's heart jumped. He had gone. Well, take care of yourself, Tasmil. Hekolil strode off in the direction of the corn porridge cellar, leaving Tasmil alone. She had had him here, and she had turned him away willfully, even unkindly. Now he was gone to search for a burial ground that he might never find. He was probably as well equipped as a polar bear would be for the tropical heat. With a sinking heart she walked down to the river to be alone.